Hello photographers, my name is Spyros Heniadis and this is where I answer your photography questions and we learn about photography together. This video is the fourth in a series on composition, and if you want to see the whole series, you can click this annotation right here. Now that we have a better understanding of how the brain processes an image and how to think about composing an image, what we're going to do is take a look at the building blocks of composition. In the first three videos, we looked at why and how to approach composing an image. And these building blocks that we're going to discuss are the tools that you can use to do things like build a visual path and change perspective. These tools can also help you create and compose the photo that communicates what you want to communicate when you take the time to ask yourself, why am I taking this photo? These building blocks are line, shape, color, and texture, and we're going to start in this video with my favorite, which is line. Now, a line is a path that connects two or more points, and lines can be real or implied. For example, here we have two lines, and the first is an explicitly defined line. It has a visible path between the two endpoints. The second is a line that is implied by the two endpoints. In this case, it's the gaze of the two figures that are looking at each other. There are several types of lines that we can use in our compositions, and each type of line can help create a different sort of feeling in a composition. We're going to start with horizontal lines, which can imply a feeling of calm or tranquility. In this example here, we have this nice horizontal line that runs across the horizon line of the photo. And this helps reinforce the nice calm feeling that I was going for, but that's not the only line in this composition. We also have the lines created by the tree, which has two central lines in the trunks, and then a multitude of smaller lines in the branches. There is also a thick, strong horizontal line at the very bottom of the frame created by the bright band of sunlight. And this line mirrors the horizontal line, which helps to reinforce the feeling of calm and tranquility. And because the mind looks for repetition and patterns, it finds even more horizontal lines in the clouds, which continue to reinforce that feeling. Now, we also have some angled lines in the foreground that help establish the visual path in this image. And for me, I start in this image on the tree. And I can actually go one of two ways. I either follow the horizon line to the right or follow the shadow that moves from the tree into that angled line of green growth in the lower right of the photo. Either way, it leads me in a loop back to the tree. If I move to the right, my eye follows the horizon and then curves down the edge of the shadow on the right to the edge of the frame, where that line of sunlight brings me back into the photo up to that line of green, which pushes me back up into the tree. Now, once I find the tree, the angled trunk pushes me up into the sky, where I end up wandering through the clouds. And there are other types of lines, and we want to look at those, so let's take a look at another example. This photo here is loaded with lines, including three very strong angled lines. And angled lines can help create a sense of energy and movement in your composition. All three lines are explicit. We have the handrail for the stairs, the support rail, and the stairs themselves. Despite the fact that the stairs are comprised of a series of vertical and horizontal lines, the repetition of the steps creates an angled line of motion through the image. And that feeling of energy and motion is further increased by the fact that this is a photo of stairs, and we have a shared understanding that we use stairs to move through buildings and other structures. And the why for this photo was an attraction to the shapes that I see here, which is something we're going to talk about in more depth in the next video. Now, vertical lines in your composition can imply strength and permanence and longevity. And this composition is lousy with vertical lines. First of all, we have this thick black vertical line that shoots up the photo. Then, throughout the entire composition, we have these repeating vertical lines in the grout lines of the bricks. This repetition is something that the brain likes. Our brains look for pattern and repetition, but what's particularly effective is when you have repetition with variety. In this photo, we have repetition of the grout lines, but there's variety amongst those lines. First, the pipes break up the patterns, but also the variation in color and the character of all of those vertical lines makes them not identical. And this sense of repetition engages the brain. But the variety within that repetition excites the brain because it does not know what to expect. Now, another type of line is the curved line, which can help create a feeling of quiet, soft, or sensuality in your image. And this is an interesting example of curved lines because you can see the mill here in this shot, which is full of vertical lines, which are strong and permanent. And you don't necessarily associate a giant and industrial complex with quiet or softness or sensuality. And I think what continually draws me to these mills is the contrast that's created by the beautiful, gentle, soft, and innocent-looking steam that comes out of these tall, vertical, strong, thick, noisy industrial complexes. So here's a case where I have two different types of lines that create a contrast in the composition. And contrast is one of the building blocks that we'll be talking about in more depth in another video. So we're going to get into that more later. Because I also want to point out that this photo demonstrates converging lines, which help create depth and scale in your image, and also create a very strong sense of motion. In this case, it's the railroad tracks, and no matter how many times I look at this photo, the tracks almost immediately grab my attention and yank me into this composition. So, altogether we have horizontal, vertical, angled, curved, and converging lines, which are all different types of lines that can be used in your compositions. But in addition to the type of line and the feeling it might impart, all lines have weight and length, which can change the impact of that line in your composition. The weight of a line is its thickness, and the length, of course, is how long that line is. Thicker lines are heavier and they can have more impact and power in an image, while thinner lines can have less impact and less power. However, length also changes the impact of a line, and longer lines generally have more impact than shorter lines do. Now consider the lines in this photo and the different weights that they have. First of all, we have the large, thick lines of the pillars moving up through this photo, and despite the weather-beaten look of them, they feel strong and permanent. Compare those to the other lines in the photo, the thin, short vertical grout lines in the bricks, the two shorter, lighter horizontal lines, and the thin but long vertical lines on the pillars. They all have a different impact due to their different qualities, which can augment or detract from a composition. And that depends entirely on what you want to achieve. And you might be thinking right now, how the hell am I supposed to remember all of this, let alone incorporate it into my compositions? And this is just line that we've talked about. We haven't talked about shape, color, or texture yet. And if you add into that thinking about the visual path and perspective and the why of a photo and all of this other composition stuff, it starts to seem very overwhelming. And the answer is that you just relax. When I compose a photo, I almost never sit there looking at the scene to dissect the lines. I might be attracted to the scene by a line that becomes the anchor of a composition, but to analyze the entire scene and map all the lines is just crazy. Instead, I maintain awareness of the lines, and by understanding how the lines can impact my composition, I can actively think about the lines and evaluate the composition when I need to. But more often than not, I'm just maintaining that awareness as I look through the viewfinder to get a feel for the composition. And that for me is the most important part, getting the feel of the composition. That's where all of this information really comes in, because with that awareness of line, you'll develop an instinct for composing and using lines to achieve exactly what you want to achieve. And in fact, you're already doing it now, but as you add what you learn about lines and shapes and colors and textures, it will help hone and develop that instinct even further and give you the option to bring it into active consideration when you need to. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. And if you have any questions about lines or using lines in your compositions, let me know down in the comments. And while you're down there, tell me, what is your favorite kind of line? Now, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you really like this video, why don't you do me a favor and share it with your friends. But the most important thing to do is to get out there, find some lines, and take some damn photos. I'll see you guys on Friday.